Hey Ed, welcome to Mass Construction Show.
Joseph, great to be here.
Yes, this has been a long-term relationship. You're one of the first people that I engaged with at the city, coming actually even as a co-op. So back when I was in college, out at Millennium Place, we have the hard hat.
Yeah, remember it well.
We have the hard hat, and it was funny at the time. That was the biggest job in the city because it was late 90s, early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of high-rise work going on, and that was just the very beginning of this boom.
That's correct. And outside of that, for private development, you're absolutely right. I mean, however, during that period, had a lot of cranes in the area because of the Central Artery project. So
yes,
that was going. But on the private development, yes, that was one of the first big projects in the city in a long while. That's correct.
Yep. That high rise, and I remember. I think at the time it was the first. It was definitely the biggest job in the city, and one of the pieces of advice I got from Mike Costello, who you know as well.
Correct.
When I was trying to decide where to go to work coming out of school, he said to me, he's like, "Don't worry about the company." He goes, "Take the job." He's like, "This job is the biggest job in the city." He's like, "It'll look good on your resume. You'll get up-down construction experience. You get high-rise experience." And he said, because there's nothing else really going on, all the subs are going to send their best foremen, their best PMs. All the unions are going to be here. You're going to engage with the city. Like, you'll get their best stewards, so you'll know the folks down the line. And it was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I got in this business.
And one other aspect of that is you get great attention from the regulatory authorities too.
Yeah. And like, you could think of it as a bad thing, but in reality, it was great to learn, to understand public works and sidewalk permits and crane permits. And I mean, God, the whole host of between the building department and the fire department and Paul Donga. And like, I met all those folks.
Correct.
20
that's
years
building
ago.
Relationships, and that's important within the industry, is that you have those relationships that basically can help you along, not hinder you, because we're not there to hurt you, believe it or not.
Yes.
A lot of people will disagree with that, but no, we're here to help you and build up the city. It's all a betterment for the city, that, we're creating jobs, we're getting good projects online, so it's very important for the city and those regulatory authorities to make sure that happens, and it happens safely.
Yeah, and I think it's harder now, and maybe not right now in this moment, but for when that boom was happening, nobody could keep up, and that included the regulatory folks, right? Like,
that's correct.
You just got flooded with all of this construction and work, and people didn't have time to come up for air. But what is troubling though, like you said it, like you learn this process and you learn who's there and who can help, and there's people like you and Jill Cox and all kinds of folks that I've met along the way that really know the agencies and know, even if you're at one agency, they say, okay, hey, if you're going to do this, you need to go see special events, so you need to go to public works, so you need to go here, you need to go there. My fear is when folks like you and Jill and whatever move on, if I'm being frank, I don't think the city did a good enough job of putting the next people in line that understand how the whole city works, right? There might be people that understand their department, but I don't know if there's the folks there that know how the whole city works. And I think that's a concern from someone in my position. I don't know how you feel about it.
I think that's a concern shared by a lot of folks within the industry, but I can assure you that, at least on my side of the house, I have individuals, some of my engineers that are coming up, they're involved in the private development reviews, like Jessica Lynch, who's outstanding on my private development, coming up with the construction management plans reviews. Timmy Burdine, he's involved in all my special events and has a citywide view and works with to your point, all the various city, state, and private agencies that make these special events, make these projects in the construction. So I know I'll feel good when I finally retire, because I know I have the personnel behind coming up that will fill in those gaps.
That's great. I mean, I feel like your group is unique in that sense, right? So Boston, arguably, they'll say is a small city, but there's a lot that happens in this small city. Just to give people reference, so some folks are listening that are not from the area as well. So as far as transportation goes, just out of curiosity, how many vehicles come and go out of the city or through the city on a day? Like what's an average flow? Do you guys kind of monitor that?
Right. So we have like a cordon count that every 10 years that, would basically we look at, have a cordon area entering into the city, be it, vehicular traffic on the highways. We even do the, transit, counting that. I mean, roughly average daily traffic in the city of Boston is roughly around, 500,000 vehicles, a day.
That's staggering. Like I would not have guessed that high. But if you think of, I think what's the city right now, around 800,000 population, or are they?
It's probably more around 750,000.
Okay, so you've got
it's grown at least 10-15% over the last 10 years.
Yes, and it's funny if you look at it historically. We're maybe getting back to where we were. We had dipped so much at one point. Now we're rising. A lot of people don't realize that the city was bigger before. It contracted, and then now it's on the uptick again, or has been for the last 30 years, right? So when you think about there's that many people in the city, and then how many people drive in for work, and there's a lot of vehicles.
A lot of vehicles, and then even like the transit ridership is something like 800,000 a day, coming in and out of the city. Commuter rail, subway, buses, and et cetera. So you're dealing with that also. But a lot of folks in and out.
Yeah. Now, do you guys are you proactively, or is the city proactively involved with keeping that traffic flow moving, or you're kind of like, okay, like everybody's just going to come and go, and we'll just sit here and watch? Or do you guys monitor anything?
Yeah, correct. I mean, our engineers and traffic, we're keeping up with the times, because in a modern city, you have to have traffic moving. Your goods and services have to be delivered in to support that construction, restaurants, etc. So it's paramount that our engineers are involved heavily into the daily routine of controlling, monitoring, and changing traffic in the city. We do that via cameras, basically PTZ cameras. We have probably roughly around 500 cameras around the city. We have a central computer system that basically talks to our traffic signals in the field, that we can set different timing patterns for, say, a PM peak, AM peak. So that computer will control that and switch off to manage those algorithms and what we're seeing in the field for traffic. So we're proactively, doing that within our traffic management center, our folks in the field. So that's important for the administration. It's important for our department, and we're charged with that to make it all work.
Yeah, so. and the people coming in and out of the city, it's important for, right?
100%.
Yeah,
because you're going to hear about traffic.
Yeah, a little
work,
bit.
You're going to hear it. So.
Yeah, I think a while back I remember you telling me, isn't there almost like a central command to some degree?
Yes.
So you can pull up, hey, like what's happening at Tremont and Boylston Street, or...
We can see all the data. We can see what the time delay is. We can see, what the speeds are, et cetera. It's all monitors that and reports back onto our, computerized system back in our traffic management center. And we have full-time personnel that basically man that, throughout the day and evening, and during special events, at the Boston Garden or Fenway Park or the Boston Marathon this weekend. So we'll have folks in there, monitoring and managing the signal splits and timing and et cetera. So.
How about the police department? Is there engagement there? I don't know this. I'm only asking because I would think there.
So I think in a lot of any of the cities that you'll go to, you'll find that it's paramount. It's essential that you basically have that relationship with Boston Police, Boston Fire, EMS, MBTA, that we're all talking. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've built up over the last 30, 40 years, to have that personnel that know each other, and you can pick up a phone or a radio or your cell, and basically have that entity, letting them know what's going, sharing the free flow of information to make all of what I just said work. So we do have those relationships with the various public safety agencies, MBTA, et cetera, that, we're very proud of here in the city, that we do have those working relationships. A lot of places that we've gone, a lot of those cities, I won't name them, but some of them don't. And it really is a barrier.
Oh, that's a surprise.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah. I mean, not that you're going to be sitting here, moving pieces around the chessboard, but I would even think, like, could the transportation department be a resource and say, listen, there's an issue over in this area, we should probably have a cop head over there and start help with
and that brings up the good
traffic
point,
flow, or
because we have our own cameras, BTD, the transportation department. The police have their own cameras. What we've done recently is we've put them all in the same system to share cameras.
Oh, that's great.
And we can talk back and forth, so we can assist them if they have a coverage that they don't have. We share the camera. We'll position the camera for them, or vice versa. And there's that free flow of information with camera coverage, et cetera. And we work, with them currently on a daily basis. So that relationship is in place. And the sharing of cameras even goes further than Boston Police. We share them with MBTA, Mass DOT. So we're all getting the same information, and it really gives if you have have to react to something, you have that much better information, and everybody's on the same page.
That's fantastic. Now, you hear a lot about kind of like smart cities.
Right.
Like, is there, are you seeing continued technology keep coming to make, like, so you can kind of almost be more responsive to?
No, just about every year. Right now in the Seaport, we have a project with Mass DOT, basically, with a new traffic control system outside of our main control system that's, based in the field with algorithms and the specialized controllers in the control boxes that basically figure out the local traffic in subsections of the city that more quickly adjust to what we're seeing in the traffic. And right now, we have that new technology being set up in the Seaport right now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what we have for results. And
yeah, a year from now, you have to tell us, because it'll be. Yeah, I don't want to use the word interesting again, but it'll be interesting to see if that has any effect. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, and now here's the thing, I've been hearing this for as long as I can remember people talking, which is everyone says traffic's getting worse. Is traffic getting worse? Are the counts going up? It feels like it is.
I mean, the volumes are, vehicular traffic definitely are going up post-pandemic. There's a lot of, increase in traffic because of, we've developed and built out a lot of the city, Seaport being one. You go to the New Balance development and build out in Allston, Brighton. Yep. You've got significant, amount of new city, new buildings, new residents, et cetera, that's going on.
Yep.
Now, obviously, we try to make a mode shift, to get them on transit, et cetera. Doesn't always work because, some people have to drive to work. They work outside the city or further parts of the city that aren't served by transit. So we're trying to work out various ways on that to improve the modal split. Try to push it, drive it more towards the transit entity and get some of these vehicles off the road. But, obviously, goods and services, you're not going to basically take transit to do that. So
you're not going to deliver packages on the tape, right? I mean, here's the thing, and I know this doesn't follow transportation BTD's lap, but just public transit, it doesn't do what a person needs it to do. If you're in an ideal spot and if you're in the right location, and yes, then it's right. But I told the story, a bunch of times. When I was in West Roxbury, I had jobs over in East Boston. If I tried to take public transportation from West Roxbury, from one side of the city to the other, it would take me 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back. And that's not doable when you're trying to run a business, to lose a half day sitting on a bus, going to Forest Hills, swapping over, going to Downtown Crossing, swapping over to the Blue Line, and then maybe taking a bus once I get off the Blue Line to go over to, like, and just right?
You're right. I mean, a lot of it has to do with reliability. And I think right now, finally, the MBTA is putting some money where their mouth is, and basically providing, more reliable transit options. You know what it's like to get on, go to Forest Hills, jump on the Orange Line, stops. You're getting nowhere, and it takes you 2 hours to get into the inner city or East Boston, etc. Very frustrating. Finally, MBTA is starting to put the money into the system that's been neglected for so long, and it's painful. But they're starting to make gains. It's not perfect. You're not getting that mode shift that we're looking for, because still the reliability is just not there.
Yeah, and I know that this isn't why we're here today. We're getting completely sidetracked, but
we both live out in West Rock, so we share those pains.
But I feel like the approach is so wrong, right? There's a lot of approach, like saying the goal appears to be, let's make it more difficult to drive to encourage people to take transportation, versus I think the better option is, let's make public transportation so good that you'd be crazy not to. Because if it was reasonable, I'd be like, oh crap, if I can do this and I can get somewhere quickly and I don't have to drive my car, I don't have to fight for parking, I might be able to get a little work done on my laptop on the way, I would jump at doing that. So I
think we all share that.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But I think we've got it backwards. It's like, let's make driving and parking and everything so difficult, and let's take away parking at places, and it's like let's make things more challenging to drive, and if that gets painful enough, they'll go use public transportation, versus thinking about it from a business perspective. If we want people to use our product, let's make our product great. Let's not make their lives miserable so they have no choice that they got to come use, right? It's like,
I think recently the administration and the mayor in the city of Boston have taken a step back in a pivot. In that, we don't want to, increase congestion and air quality in the city, that we have to do some better engineering, basically, to figure out these things. Where do bus lanes make sense? Where do bike lanes make sense? What's the, daily traffic or on arterial street? Are we reducing it by 50%? So the mayor has basically, charged us with, let's step back, let's see what we've done over the last 3 years, and let's take a look at it and see if it makes sense. Some of the things don't make sense. So we're going to basically, fix those, put them back, increase things. So that type of stuff is going on right now, and I think that's a good thing, because as you know, we go by the 5 E's in engineering. You got engineering, you got education, and you got enforcement. Those are the 3 E's that we run by, that have to happen in order for something to work.
Yep.
If you don't, you're going to implement a bus lane and you don't have enforcement, not going to work.
Yeah, we see that. Everybody sees the little video clips of that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So,
or the education piece is they're confused. Like, there's been times where I'm confused. Like, there's this one by Roach Brothers. I clearly drove on the wrong part one time, because I'm like, which way am I going? And I didn't know, so I just ended up driving through what was either a bus lane or a bike lane, or I don't know what it was. But I thought that was,
you'll be glad to know,
telling me where to turn.
Those flex posts have come out. You can take the right into Roach Brothers now. So
okay, yeah. So that's the education piece, right? Because I'm like,
what does this mean? Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, who wouldn't? But I look like that approach much more. So rather than, hey, how can we get bike lanes into the city? Their approach now, it sounds like what you're saying is, how can we put bike lanes in spots where they work?
Correct.
Rather than let's just get bike lanes in, it's like, let's get bike lanes in where they work.
That is correct.
Right. Completely different animal. And I think a lot of people that push back on bike lanes, hand up right here, like a lot. I think it's because they don't work. The ones that went in didn't work. And personally, I actually just felt almost nervous about it, right? Which is, okay, I have somebody driving on my right side that I'm so used to taking a right-hand turn and not having to look in my rearview mirror to take a right-hand turn. And there's like all this confusion. I'm like, God forbid. I'm like, if I hit somebody, like I'm ruining my life, that person's life. Like, I'm like, I really don't like this. This is making me very uncomfortable. And like, so when they're kind of forced into places, which is what I felt like was happening, I think you got a lot of people with a lot of pushback and a lot of people upset because they're like, this is, crazy. And that takes apart the backup of traffic that may or may not have happened. So, I mean, I think that's a good step back and that should be applauded, right? Which is like...
It's a little bit of a step back, a little bit of a pivot going towards more of the engineering, public safety end of things. And I think, the administration realizes that's a good and safe thing to do. So
yeah, and you can get both, right? Yeah. All right, now you're here to talk about construction. That's
right.
I selfishly want to just hear the cool stuff and talk about just generally traffic flow and how that affects everybody, because I'm sure all the local people listening, that's what they care about, right?
100%.
You affect your morning and evening every single day, right? So what's the logic there? So that's nice. I appreciate it.
And I think, most major cities have the same thing going on, so, and it's not just a Boston thing. It's going on in, New York City. It's going on Seattle. It's going on in, Albuquerque.
Absolutely. I mean, so I pay close attention to like permitting stuff, and you look at the amount of headlines across the country. Toledo, Ohio rolls out new fast track permit. Like Green Bay, is trying to solve, expediting. San Francisco's putting a shot clock on their. Every single city is suffering the same problems: traffic, permitting, trying to build housing, right?
Yes.
And like it seems like Austin is the only city in the entire friggin' country that is actually kind of getting some of this, or are really kind of solving it in a big way.
And part of the reason that's getting solved is former Commissioner Feindaka from
really
ET. She was the Public Works Transportation Commissioner in Austin and brought a lot of these new technologies and stuff down there.
Oh, can you make a connection for me? I got to get her on and say, how did you do this?
Gina would be glad to come on.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So for people that haven't worked in the city before, and let's say they've always worked out in 495, or they're coming to the city and they're going to be doing a construction project. There's two big things that from a transportation department perspective that they'll run into. The CMP, the construction management plan, and then in some cases a TAPA, less frequent TAPA. Could you talk about both of those? What are they?
Okay, so I'll start off with the TAPA, the Transportation Acts Plan Agreement. So that's all part of the Article 80 review process, the overall reviews for project before it goes to the BRA board or BPDA now. If for approval of the project, there's a transportation component to the Article 80 review. That's the TAPA. Yep. And that's a planning study that basically evaluates what the project impact on the public right-of-way, traffic, et cetera, and what's it going to have. And it's worked out through our planning staff.
Okay. And just for people that don't know, when you're saying the term Article 80, that is the Boston planning now, right? Because you said BRA and then it's BPDA and now it's actually BPA, right? Yeah. You've been through 3 iterations of that department. Okay. But let's call it planning or zoning in any other city, right? That agency, that department, if you're over 50,000 square feet, you're doing a large project.
Correct.
Which they call the Article 80 large project review. And within that review process is where they ask for the TAPA.
Correct.
And that's an analysis of what the impact the building will have on the neighborhood. Is that a fair?
Or traffic or overall, and there's mitigation that's built into that agreement with the development team. That could be a new signal.
New signal, new lights, sidewalks,
etc.
accessibility, ramps, that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
And then below that is the small project review. TAP is not required for that.
Got it.
Okay. Getting into the construction management plan that goes concurrently with these developments is they're required for both small and large projects.
Yep. Yeah. And what's the? I guess I know there's no. I don't believe there's a formal trigger, but what's the trigger for when a CMP is required?
We basically require a CMP even if it's a single family going up in the city, which puts a lot of burden on my staff because there's over the last 10 years has been quite the boom going on in the city. But anything, even I find amazingly enough that the smaller projects are the most headaches, in quality of life for residents, et cetera. Building your generally smaller lots with less, zero lot line build out. So that creates its own problems. We try to figure out how we're going to build this, what the site utilization for construction to build the project out, what the methodology of construction is to achieve that, and basically, how that project within the site utilization, and the construction methodology is figured out into the construction management plan to lessen impact on the public right of way. So in effect, you look at ISD. ISD basically permits everything in the building. Everything in the building out. Everything outside that building to build the building is in our
scope. Yep.
And scope. So we review it from that aspect. Okay. So, which gets very tricky.
Okay. So if you're anything that's ground up should have a CMP.
Correct.
And then a significant renovation.
Significant renovations, yes.
Yeah.
I could give you an example right now. Right at Packard's Corner, the old Hamilton building. They're going through a significant renovation, and it really has big-time impacts on the public right-of-way at Malvern Street, Com Ave, the crane work that's necessary to build out the new HVAC systems, that they're putting into the buildings, the facade restoration, so...
Yeah, absolutely. And I would think, especially on the single-family ones, where if you happen to have a home builder, if you're building single families, the odds are you're working in the suburbs, right? That's where most of that single-family style work. But then you come over and you go to work in the city and build a single family, and you've gone from a suburban lot where you can drive the concrete truck on the front lawn and,
correct,
or queue up a couple on the front and then bring them. And now you're dealing with, oh, hey, I'm trying to have a boom truck and a concrete truck to deliver forms or sheetrock, and I'm on a street that's a one-way street with parking on both sides, and now I have to access the property.
Correct.
That's a whole different animal, right?
Totally.
You're building a single family in both places, but it's the impact on the community is tremendous when you get into East Boston or Brighton or wherever you have a tighter fit like that. What are some of the things that you want to see in a CMP? What should folks be looking at? So somebody that doesn't know what a CMP is, they're like, okay, this is a plan to do what, right?
So basically, the CMP is going to start with a narrative and basically a plan, and the plans are basically concurrent with each phase of construction. Be it, demolition of existing cut and caps of utilities, and then you roll into the excavation, phase, to the foundation phase, to the erection phase with the cranes, to the, exterior building, build out and siding, etc. So each one of those phases requires its own separate plan of what the methodology is and what the equipment is needed and how it's going to be situated on the site.
And physically think about it as a site logistics drawings per phase.
Correct.
But looking at it through a lens of how it will affect traffic, neighbors,
pedestrians.
Yeah, pedestrians. And not just from a traffic standpoint, from a sound, from a dust, from a
100%.
So multiple phase drawings through all the phases that Ed just laid out with the lens of pedestrians, traffic, neighbors, noise, dust, general hazards, right?
Excavations, rodents. You got to cover that too. So a lot of the old city, you're excavating, you disturb nests and stuff. You have to have a plan for that. That's included in the CMP as well.
Okay, so let's take a urban lot where you've got, zero lot line, could be in a more downtownish kind of area. Only way to do that work is to take sidewalk, take some road. Maybe in some cases it's significant where they're going to have to maybe reroute some traffic, right? Like, are those things all possible? And like, what would you tell somebody that has that super tight lot in a more urban environment without lay down area on site? Like, what is how do they go about making that happen? And then what are some good strategies for them?
Good point. And that, and I get it all the time. Some smaller projects, becomes a problem because you're at a zero lot line and they all propose a slope cut earth retention system. They don't want to get into soldier pile lagging or support. And that's a problem because when you go that route, you're taking sidewalks, you're taking roadways, to make that work, per the OSHA regulations. And so we're pushing them to more of a internal earth support system, be it soldier pile lagging,
sheet
piles, etc., to keep it tight, that we're not giving up sidewalks and lanes of traffic and stuff like that. And that happens, honestly, Joe, every time I get one, it starts off, and then we pare it back into a proper urban,
excavation.
Yep. Correct.
But you still, even if you put sheet piles, you're still got to get the material out of the hole. So you got to get a machine there, right? That's going to, you can put it in the hole a little bit, but then you got to have the truck there, and eventually the machine's got to come out to make the last few scoops, right? So,
and you got to get the crane to get the excavator out of the hole. So,
So like, let's go blow by blow. Like, you need a sidewalk permit, you need a street permit. Should people, obviously you got to know all the conditions, but if it's a relatively narrow street, you're crane on the weekends?
Generally off hours on the weekends, and that happens considerably and at some bit of a cost. So people have to start thinking about that, get their plans in, get the reads of what we're going to require, to basically keep that quality of life and keep the site safe. So you're absolutely right. You're going to need a sidewalk permit. You need a roadway permit, because generally I'll give the sidewalk area, we'll convert like the parking lane in front of the project into a temporary pedestrian walkway to give them that room, that you get the earth support in there, that you can get a small machine in there to start doing some of the excavation and stuff. Just as a template, I should say. How what we're gonna require for what permitting and for what the methodology is.
Yeah, and I think I've watched the approach change over the years, where it used to be, okay, let's have people cross the street and walk to the other sidewalk, but would you find a problem with that?
Again, it's all a public safety issue, in that, crossing pedestrians mid-block out up in front of a construction work zone is not safe, in any means. And it's something that we try to work to maintain some semblance of a walkway adjacent to the project, so we're not crossing kids and families and, pedestrians, mid-block on a city street,
Yeah, and even, here's the thing, even if it's not mid-block, even if it's at the corner, human nature is, what is everyone going to do? They're just going to walk along the fence line in the street.
100%.
They're not going to cross over.
It's a cattle chute,
Right.
Yeah. And that's what we try, unfortunately you can't really engineer to that, but you can certainly put in design to that effect. You know what I mean?
Yep. People are going to do what they're going to do, but if you
got to plan for human nature.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. Nobody's going to cross the street they're going to walk adjacent to the construction work zone.
Yes. And so for people, if you're not following the picture we're painting here, I'll try and paint it for you. You know, outside of your site, so because you have a zero lot line, you're right up on the edge, you're going to have to take the sidewalk, the first parking space, and that's going to allow maybe a small machine, a truck, maybe you got to take a little bit of the road so a truck can drive in, they can load the truck and keep going. So now you've taken all that space, but you've taken the sidewalk, the parking space, and the road. Now the person walking down the sidewalk, where do they go? And what Ed is saying is like the new approach now is let's, rather than tell them go cross the street, get to the other sidewalk, let's create a sidewalk outside of that drive lane where you're driving your truck through with Jersey barriers.
Yep.
And give people a walkway so they can just walk right around the fencing, get back on the sidewalk on the same side of the street, on the other side of the site, and keep going.
Correct.
Right.
And sometimes the trade-off on that is not just a parking lot. Maybe we got to give a lane away to accommodate that thing too, which has happened some larger projects and stuff like that. And we mitigate some of that stuff with, you know, police detail control of traffic to pull traffic during hours. And sometimes we have, collapsible work zones where you'll take the lane during the day, during work hours, collapse it, and create that walkway within the parking lane again. So that happens quite often too. So
Yep.
based on the needs and the site utilization to build the building safely, we evaluate it that way.
Anything else you would think about in that case, important things to consider that, ideally you want to see when you're looking at a plan?
I mean, obviously pedestrians is a priority in that aspect. I mean, vehicular traffic and, level of service of that traffic, and that we're not screwing up traffic in the downtown or neighborhood area. We want to see how we can mitigate that with construction techniques, and which are many. We were just talking about top-down construction, and that creates some opportunities for some deck, to support some of that stuff while the construction goes on. So,
yeah, and I think you probably see these. You see it so much that it's just kind of a given. But for people that haven't done these before, overhead protection for pedestrians, lighting within that overhead
really
protection. Does BTD care about scrim or no scrim? What's your kind of take on that?
No. So we were very concerned about the scrim in that it basically, if the project is Jersey barrier and the sidewalks on the outside, we want scrim along the above a 3-foot fence above the Jersey barrier scrim to keep the dust in et cetera down. What we don't want to see on the scrim aspect, if we're basically putting up a temporary walkway in the parking lane and we're going with overhead protection, basically for, obviously fall protection, that they do not put that scrim on the exterior of the barrier, meaning the outside along the scaffolding. It's got to be on the backside. Reason for that is public safety. We want to have from the street visibility into the walkway during that operation. We do not want to have a walkway that's obstructed.
Like a tunnel. Yeah.
And there's been many circumstances due to public safety that there's concern on that. So that's something that we look at.
That's a very good one to know. And then what's your, I know I've seen it come up where the request is that on property lines facing public ways, you want what you're describing there, which is Jersey barrier with fence on top of it.
Right, on the backside.
Yeah. And so essentially whatever your break is from the public, whether it's a sidewalk or a street or whatever, that break from the public way is Jersey barrier and with fence on top of it.
Correct.
Is kind of the standard now.
That is the standard.
Yeah. The side fencing, no. But
absolutely
where you front the public way, you're looking for that with the scrim, scrim with appropriate ventilation so it doesn't rip the fence down with a windstorm. So lighting, overhead protection, all that stuff we're talking about. What happens when we get into like these significant one-time kind of events where, you're in Beacon Hill and you need a crane, right? Street's only so wide, so you have to clear out the cars, come in and make a pick, right? Or you've got a helicopter pick going on, like
which happens often.
Yeah. Yeah. How many times a year do you think you're seeing that?
So it's interesting. The window is getting smaller because what happens is during the non-firefighting seasons that these helicopters they come cross country.
Oh.
During their non, like wintertime, etc., when they're not fighting fires, they come east to make these major picks on our buildings downtown.
I had no idea there was
It's all tied in there because they're not available, and it's a specialized helicopter that can do the lift capacity
to drop the water. Yeah. Yep.
So that's kind of the way we worked it with the helicopters. I mean, FAA requires certain limits in area. Where you're refueling the helicopter has to be in the plan. What's the impact zone where you're going to cordon off how many streets, etc. And we plan that with the helicopter company and the general contractor to work out a plan to safely make that happen. We just did one in Post Office Square not too long ago, and we're closing off Congress Street and all the side street, Federal Street, all those different streets that have to be cordoned off because of the safety aspect that's required, that we require, but also FAA requires.
Interesting.
So, that happens. And generally, it will happen on a Sunday.
Yep.
And or a Saturday. And that definitely does not happen during the work week in the city.
And probably even early in the morning on a Sunday, probably, right? Or
early.
Yeah.
Whatever, because, they fly in from either Norwood or, they used to be over in the seaport, but that helicopter situation is gone. And they'll come in early, land, go over a safety brief. Everybody on the job site gets safety briefs, glasses, helmets, everything has to be there because it's
a serious operation. Yeah,
100%. And that's we take it that way. We don't knock on wood. Never had a mishap on any of that stuff, and we want to really hammer home that safety aspect and the site rep for that stuff.
And then similar process with a large pick to the top of a building, good size crane, shutting down streets. What's the swing radius? What's the
load capacity? What's the compression of the roadway? Utilities that are underneath. Those are all taken into consideration. I mean, we've had a last few weekends at 470 Atlantic, right next to the Moakley Bridge. There's a lot of retrofitting going on with HVAC and some other stuff, and we've got like a 500-ton crane that's going to be has been placed out there. It's 8 hours to set up. It's 8 hours to take down. The biggest thing there is that it's right next to the two things. It's right next to the tunnel. Williams, not the Ted Williams, but the Tip O'Neill Tunnel. So MassDOT wants to see some of the compression and load.
Yep.
It's not on their tunnel, but it's
close.
Anything within 15 to 20 feet. You got to provide those analysis.
Yep.
For the compression. And on the other side is the Moakley Bridge. Same thing. We have to construct, obviously expansion joint, with a potential, 15 to 20 feet away. You got to get the bridge engineer those calculations that, you're within the tolerance to set that crane up. So that literally took, for that specific, to get going on those picks, it probably took about 3 months.
That's interesting. That's my next question. But before I even go there, it's and then even worse, I think, is sidewalk vaults.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right. So the tunnel and the bridge are probably going to be all right. You clearly need to check it, but some of these old sidewalk vaults are much more subject to collapse, and I think a lot of people are even in some cases unaware they're even there, right? You can't, some of them you don't see because you're not accessing them from the sidewalk, you're accessing them from the building. You go the basement into it. So who's checking those calculations?
So the calculations on the areaway sidewalk vaults and stuff, we have the crane company does the submittal on the analysis, and we're not going to allow them to set up on a vault.
Period.
Technically, period.
Yeah.
And technically, there's supposed to be H20 loading. That's probably, there are a lot of them in disrepair. And H20 loading is not going to suffice for a 100-ton crane.
Can you explain H20 loading to people?
It's basically the load bearing within the sidewalk, basically going to accommodate like a SU-30, which is a delivery truck. Yep. And that's what it is on the calculation. We're talking a 100-ton crane. That is not going to make it. We, as a general rule of thumb, there is no way we're going to allow any crane setup on any areaway vaulted sidewalk. Period.
Even with like heavy dunnage or something to span it, or
negative. No.
Okay.
So it's just too much of a
risk.
Within the public's realm, safety realm.
Yeah. So, and then my next question was: so you have all of these, a large crane pick, helicopter pick, even large deliveries, right? Like oversized loads. How much time should someone be allowing for the planning of that process?
Great question. I mean, we go by the Chapter 90 rule and regulation for over-dimensional vehicles. So, need to provide a certified route survey for roadway for both overheight structures, utility structures, if it's, obviously based on weight.
Yep.
We're concerned about that, or the height. We have a lot of Eversource, transformers that are moved around quite often.
Yep.
That produce a lot of problems, and then when we can run them in and out. So there's a whole calculation of route survey, and weight comes in on bridge weights, etc. Bridges, overheight structures, all into a report that's required.
In presumably turning radius?
Oh yeah, that's all in the route survey.
Okay. And who does that?
Generally, it's done by a...
is it like a VHB or...
Like a VHB or Howard Stein Hudson or, any of the civil engineering consulting companies. They'll provide those documents that we require. Mass DOT requires it,
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so you've got something that's coming over a distance, even let's say it's coming from Springfield, right?
Yep.
They're going to have to coordinate with all the different police departments that they travel through. But then you, as the city of Boston, want to see, okay, once you cross the line, what do you have and then do you expect them to say what time of day they're going to do it, or do you govern what time of day they'll do it?
Technically, Mass DOT will give out a permit for their roadways, and specifically says on their oversized load permit, this permit is only good on Mass DOT roadways. Once they hit the city line, we have our own requirements. Basically, it's still the Chapter 90 requirements, but obviously, once you get into a city urban environment, you got a lot more issues with turning radius, overheight bridges, etc., utilities that are in the roadway. So we require a report on our portion. Police, same thing. I mean, we have loads coming from across country. They had to go through Illinois, through Ohio, but obviously, once they get into Massachusetts, they're going to pick the load up. Mass State Police.
Yep.
Once they deliver it to the city, Boston Police is going to take it from there, based on that whole
jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yep. And what's the timeline on this? When do you want to see that report? Like, how many days, how many months before the actual event? Before the actual event,
we want to see it at least a month in advance, so that we're scheduling that with other activities, special events, or other construction that's going on in the city to make sure that it's still a viable route.
Okay, that's a good point. Yep. And then will you govern and say, because you said Mass DOT will give them an allowance when they can be on the road at this time, will you then issue them kind of like a permit or permission, like, yes, you can do this, we're going to allow you to do it on this day at this time?
That's correct. I mean, generally we're in sync. Again, it gets back to those working relationships. I'm in touch all the time with District 6 or Mass DOT. We're talking about these loads coming in, what time. Generally, they're going to require them to be off hours overnight, which is fine with me, and if not, we'll work something out that's compatible, but certainly we will dictate the hours that they're coming in and the dates that they're coming in.
Okay.
And we do that, again, in consultation with Mass DOT.
Yeah. So at least a month, but preferably more.
Correct.
And then is that the same for large picks, helicopter, crane picks?
Oh, the helicopter picks, that's a minimum of 3 months in advance, because you got to get all kinds of, FAA from the feds on their permit. They won't issue anything until we're issuing a permit, that whole game.
Oh, okay.
Mass DOT won't do that unless we approve. So we get everything, there's quite a lot of permitting that involved in that, not just local, just state and federal permitting that's required for that stuff.
Okay. And then significant crane picks where they're going to need to take parking spots, close sidewalks, close streets. Like, what are you looking for from a planning standpoint? Is that probably a month again, or is that more?
Like a month. It depends on what size pick again, and where it is. I mean, obviously location plays a lot into the decision and when we're going to do things. But again, it's all we want the pick package. We want the compression reports. We want the, obviously the setup, etc.
Yeah, so they've got a lot of prep before they're even submitting to you. But
in these companies, in all honesty, Joe, is they know what's required. They're in the business. It's a public safety issue, and they don't want to be on the, no pun intended, on the hook for it. So, they're professional. They, anybody that's pulling the permit, I require the crane company itself to pull the permits. And because they hold a hoisting license, etc. So they're going to be looking out for that, and it behooves them to get that in early for review. So, and they know that for the most part.
Yeah. What do the successful projects look like? When, like, what are the things that people are doing that really lend to minimal impact on the neighborhood, a high level of comfort for the transportation department? Do you have things that you see when you walk out and, you're doing a drive-by and you see something just like, oh, okay, wow, this is like, yes, this is what we're looking for. Like, these people are doing it right. Like, what's a good job look like to you?
No, something, I think it comes down to the personnel, these GCs, general contractors, and their men and women that are on these sites, making sure that the construction management plan is implemented correctly, that you have the walkways, you have the safety signage, you have all that, and it's just not on the day that you implement it. It's on a daily basis. They need to walk that site and basically do a safety check on the projects. And there's a lot of examples, and I'm very proud of these men and women too, because they take pride in their work, on the safety aspect. And you go by the site and it's working, it's running smoothly. There's zero accidents, etc. So that's what makes me happy, is that people are taking it seriously and looking at the safety aspect of their project and making sure that it works.
Yeah. So what's on paper is what is out on site.
Yes.
And then from a housekeeping standpoint, that they're on it every day, and it's, oh, we're not parking something out in the street where we're not supposed to. We're not, putting a pallet on a sidewalk while we get to, it's and that kind of
by, yes.
Yep.
They have a nice visit for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about even like dust mitigation and stuff? Is it, is it street sweepers? Is it watering down sites when we're doing excavation?
Good point. And that, as part of our construction management plan, one of the...
Look at this. I could work for you.
Yeah.
You could send me out.
Absolutely. Love to have you. I think, in this construction management plan, one of the key points is during excavation phase, there's the mechanical sweeper on site, on a daily basis. Not the laborer with a broom. It's a mechanical sweeper doing the dust control around the project. Second thing is implementation of, wheel washes at every gate, entrance and exit is built in every plan that we approve. That we expect that, these larger projects and even on the smaller ones, wheel washes are there, so they're not tracking the debris all around the community in the city. And I'm sure you've seen it before.
Yeah.
Where when that happens, it's a disaster.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got a ticket for dirt in the street, and that was like a ticket for, I'm like, what? Like, I didn't even know that existed. I was like, it was one of those green tickets.
Yes.
It was like $1,000 or something. I'm like, what? I'm like,
Department.
what are you talking about? They're like, there's dirt in the road. I'm like, yeah, what? So what if there's dirt in the road? Like, I mean, like, what, you give me a ticket for it? Like,
Should have got two.
Yeah. I just didn't know. Like, I just didn't know that existed, right? I mean, it makes sense now, but in the moment, I was like, you give me a ticket? Like,
Must have
what?
been on the Millennium Project, Joe.
It probably was.
I would have blamed it on Mike Costello.
Yes. So if I'm painting that picture, we've got a wheel wash. We're probably hosing down if we're doing demo or excavation. We're keeping a clean site. We've got good overhead protection, good signage, lighting. Like that's the stuff you're caring about, right? So things are clear. People aren't getting confused.
Yeah, and the thing, again, a lot of the during the excavation phase, a lot of that's going to be fill that goes back in, so they have mounds of it. Either it's covered or on a daily basis.
Oh, good point, yeah.
It's watered down because this goes everywhere, and the complaints that we get in are just nonstop. So it's something that we really keep on the general contractors to make sure that they manage that aspect of the job. Very important.
Yeah. What are some of the situations that will raise a little bit of concern for you? Like I know one of them over the years has been, if the project is near a school, right? That's going to cause, okay, well, you know what, we've got to have some extra attention paid here. Are there any other items where you're like, okay, this is...
Schools is very important. We want to have them meet with the headmaster or the principal of the schools. We meet collectively with them, go over what time their arrival, dismissal of students, so that we can basically work into the construction management, the plan for when trucking is not going to occur when these students are in the area, traversing the school. Another good point that you're bringing up is also hospitals. Hospital areas and stuff like that. We work with the hospitals on their emergency access, patient access to the hospital. Right now we're doing Mass General, $3 billion job. And the tricky thing is you're doing this massive construction and you've got to keep the hospital open and viable. And that construction management plan, we probably went around for about 3 years on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I didn't really think about it, but you can't go ahead and say, okay, yeah, you guys can close down the street, but that's ambulance access to the building, or that's the emergency route. Like, I don't know if they have such a thing.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, is there certain paths, like, oh, hey, if you're a Fallon ambulance or whatever, like, once you hit this point, you go this way, and that's how you access the hospital, right?
Exactly. And we go through the city through training with the public safety partners, with the hospitals. Like, say, if you have a mass casualty, response, like it was the marathon bombings, and we have a whole response plan of what we're using to get apparatus, ambulances, what we need open, etc. So that's important, and that goes along with into the construction, and we're working, a hospital and stuff like that. And one of the big things with the new construction with the tower cranes, and if you think about it, they have a helipad on Mass General. There's a certain influence that you cannot encroach upon on that flight path so tower crane placement had to be basically moved around to basically
stay out of that zone of influence.
Huh. So these little things, but they're big things, that you think about and that go into these construction management plans and thinking that you got to go through.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful for people if you just to think about this, especially around the schools, right? So some people might be thinking like, okay, you got to coordinate around kids getting dropped off because his bus is coming and going or whatever. But if you're in a tight and urban environment and you've got a little kid who's 3 feet tall and you're in a big giant truck lifted up off the ground, you can't see that kid. And if they're stepping out from behind a car, you can't see that kid. So there's a tremendous amount of hazard there, and I think if people stop and think about that for a moment, it's, it's not just about, hey, how do we keep people moving? It's about, no, there's a legit safety hazard. If you have multiple large trucks coming through with hundreds, if not 1,000 plus little kids roaming around, it's a major issue. And again, I didn't think about the hospital. I hadn't come across that, but that's a good one. Anything else? If it's like a high traffic
is always central business district. If you're building in the central core, I mean, there's special. And one of the things that back in the 80s or early 80s when I first started, there was no housing downtown, so you could put everything out at night.
Yeah,
not a problem.
Yep, do it on Saturday, Sundays. The financial district is empty, right?
Absolutely. Now, not the case. So that option and basically building is not really available these days. Now you're going to have to figure out more of all this daytime construction with major arterial traffic institutions, universities, central business district, where we could throw it off on a night. Now you can't. And, because of the quality of life, you got people living downtown now that
yeah, or where you'd say, like, let's do it 6 a.m. on a Saturday in the financial district because no one's there. Well, no, now you can't do it at 6 a.m. because somebody's there's 100 people sleeping in that building.
It's made our job a lot more difficult, but, it's for the better. And,
yeah.
And that's why, very succinct, well thought out construction management plans are required, because there's a lot of these little things you really don't think about that play a big part.
A couple of the more like just fun items. What's kind of the most impressive undertakings that you've been part of?
One, definitely the Central Artery. That starting from the inception, basically the original plan was to close the Central Artery and reroute all traffic, to 128, and that's what we were dealing with. And we fought them. We fought the state on that, and it's like we got to keep the city open. So we went through all the engineering planning with the slurry wall construction, transfer beams with basically cutting the vents to transfer the loads out of the underpinning beams sitting on the slurry wall to keep that expressway open during the construction and working underneath on a tunnel.
Wow.
So that was, years just going through that and actually seeing it happen was pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
There will be weekends that where the road was the next Monday, road wasn't there anymore.
It's wild.
Circulating traffic through and all the construction and that, a lot of relationship building on that, with the general contractor, with, Mass DOT and Bechtel, who was the
lead.
Yeah.
On that. Did you ever listen to the GBH podcast about the Big Dig?
Yeah, no, I wasn't impressed.
No?
No, I really, a lot of the people they had on there weren't involved in it. So.
Oh, really? Okay.
So.
You're the first person that I've heard say that, but you probably obviously have a lot more intimate knowledge of what happened. I just felt like as a outsider, I was pretty young when the dig was going on, so I would just or at least when it was starting, but just names I hadn't heard in forever. Like I forgot the name Christy Myhouse, right? Jordan Levy and Christy Myhouse, they were just everywhere. So like to be listening and be like, oh crap, I forgot that person even existed, and he was like they were front and center for years.
I hate to say it, Christy Myhouse and others and stuff like that. That was on the political end of thing. That wasn't really on the construction, building this thing. They were in charge, but those engineers that were from Mass DOT and Bechtel that we worked with, those are the real heroes that that really got this thing done. And,
yeah, I think there's two looks at it, right? Which is like the engineering marvel that went into it and coordinating all that is amazing, right? But
the political
side, not as amazing as the engineering feat and the logistical feat, but still a pretty wild story.
Yes, I
right?
would agree with that.
So I think they were probably trying to. I think they leaned more heavily on the politics of it, right?
Right.
And even how I forget, it was some off ramp or something that was designed ZZ or something like that.
Scheme Z,
and like in that. So I found it interesting, and especially just because it brought up stuff that I was like, God, I just forgot about all that. That was like such a major deal. You know, and it's funny, it's a little thing that I even use it for perspective all the time. When you get worked up about stuff, they say, is it going to matter in 4 days, 4 weeks, or 4 years, right? Or 4 months or whatever, right? When you think about it through that perspective, like, why am I getting worked up over this? And, you know, in 4 months from now, I'm not even going to remember this happened, right?
I'll tell you a little story. Matt Wiley was the lead for Bechtel. Nice guy, you know, at first, you know, coming into the city, you know, being a Bostonian and, you know, working for the city, you know, looked at it a little differently, these guys coming in. And there was General Flynn, who was the lead at Mass DOT that most people know. He was an actual general in the Army and part of the Army Corps of Engineers that basically Mass DOT brought on board. Great guy, great manager. And it got down to, so it's like if Ed Hesford was being a pain in the ass, the general would call us up with Matt Wiley and we'd have a conversation, have a coffee, how can we work this out? And the general would say, we're going to utilize the Delphi method. The Delphi method was, Matt, you have your say. It sticks on that board. Ed sits here. We're going to do that right in the middle. So that's how it would have got resolved, you know.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, so he was a great guy. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but and Matt to this day remains a friend and a good guy.
That's great.
And it's all about working relationships and working together, you know, instead of apart. So
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, like how many people out there made that happen, right? Guys and girls like that. How does a city manage these large events, right? So, crazy big concert at Fenway Park,
Marathon.
The Boston Marathon, even something as simple as closing down Newbury Street when they do it on the
Open Newbury? Yes.
Yeah, like they'll do like a Saturday, Sunday thing. Is it usually a full weekend or is it just a day that they'll close it?
It's generally a Sunday, and it's, you know, the Sunday has open. We do it on Canal Street. We do it on Newbury Street. We've had open Washington Street or JP. You know, we'll do that. It's a lot, extremely a lot of coordination that goes into that. We have a special events group consisting of BTD. I have my engineer Tim Burdine that sits on that committee, with Boston Police, which is the Bureau of Field Services, Boston Fire, EMS, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, the event organizers, etc. And we basically, you know,
Public Works?
Public Works is involved, ISD is involved. Every agency just about has a representative in this group, you know, to discuss these events. And that's kind of a working model that's been so successful for the last 30 years, is those relationships to work together as one to make these things happen. I think that's a hallmark and something the city of Boston should be very proud of how we pull off these special events, be it, you know, Tall Ships is coming up again, and, you know, the Marathon and Caribbean Festival, you know, or etc. So if you saw behind the curtain, there's so much coordination that goes in between these agencies to make this thing safe and basically a fun event.
Yeah. Do they have like one overarching permit for that, or is it just all these different agencies issue multiple?
So we issue, the transportation department, we issue the event permit per se, you know, for the closure of streets, for parades, etc. But there's an overall permit that's through the special event, Mayor's Office of Special Events, that basically is a sign off by all the agencies. You know, if you're serving food, ISD is going to get involved.
For health department or whatever.
Department. You know, you got temporary generators. You know, you're getting.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, right? Because I would think you would need one central permit housing in that everybody's got to give the okay on, and you might need to get a fuel storage permit with BFD still, but at least BFD is going to look at that special event permit and say, yes, we are okay with them.
Exactly, because if you were an organizer back in the day and you try to basically work around these various permitting authorities, so circuitous that nothing can get done.
Yeah,
nothing.
That's why I was thinking them, but it must be
We bring everybody in the same place, bring the organizer in, and we all go through the list.
Yeah, and special events takes the lead.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any good place, this is getting back to the construction side of things, is there any good place where someone could go if they are going to, start to do a construction management plan, or they know they need to do one, that will say the requirements, or if things get updated, like we talk about this
They can
now?
come to mass construction.
Yes, they could. They could. But also, like, when things change about, okay, now we'd like, rather than just a fence, we want the Jersey barrier with the fence on it. Like, as things get updated, is it just the BTD website? Is that the...
It's on the BTD website. Correct.
Yeah. And
generally, we have a on the website, there's a construction management section that gives you those bullet points, what we're looking for.
yeah.
So, and, a lot of times, my engineer, Jessica Lynch, if somebody's looking to acquire some information, we'll give them a sample of a very similar type of project that they can use as a template when putting together their narrative in plans.
Yeah.
We're always doing that.
Okay. And then also you guys have a CAD standard?
There's a CAD standard. It's on our webpage. Gives you all the font and the
title block, what everything
Correct.
should look like.
You can download it. Yep. Correct.
Okay. And then that is for every project, or just...
Generally, that's going to be the large project review stuff.
Yep.
The single family or the triple decker or whatever. We're not that stringent on
the CAD standard.
on the CAD standards,
Yeah.
etc.
Good to know. All right, and the last question that I ask everybody is, over the next 2, 5, 10 years, you pick, this isn't science, right? What do you think we'll see more of, and what do you think we'll see less of? You can answer both. You can, if you only have an opinion on one, that's fine, but kind of where do you see us going based off of, what you see every day? You interface with like so many companies and so many agencies, from MBTA and DOT and BPD, and what do you think? What do you think we'll see more of? What do you think we'll see less of?
I think one of the mainstays is obviously hospitals, and those institutions. They're continually expanding due to new technology and research, etc. I'm not really talking biomedical per se, but I'm actually talking about the physical hospital. Like Mass General going on right now, the future Beth Israel, Brigham and Women's. I mean, that's always going to continue, and it's going to get larger because of the new technology as being developed. Other things, the affordable housing market right now, it's a priority. We're trying to grow right now, and I think there's going to be a lot of advancement in that. City as technology develops, across, if it's, obviously, new solar, new, obviously, renewable energy. That's always going to be, in production. So I don't think, and again, right now it's kind of in a lull right now because of some of the stuff with tariffs, and a lot of engineering companies right now reevaluating these projects based on some of the things that are being, dealt with in DC, et cetera.
Yeah, there's a ton of headwinds, right? Tariffs, interest rates.
And they're looking at phase 2 of Mass General right now, and they have to recalculate all that, and the steel input, steel import, et cetera, where that's coming, and it's astronomical what they're looking at, some of the increases. So trying to gain that, put that aside,
Yeah, so you see the future as because obviously you're not seeing it let up. The work at the hospitals is not letting up.
Or the institutions, be it the universities, colleges, obviously that's always growing. I mean, a Harvard job right now, I mean, that whole Conrail yard that's down there, I mean, that's huge. It's acres and acres of development that they're looking to do. I mean, it's basically, it's going to be a new, like the seaport, it's going to be a new city.
Yeah,
and that's coming up, and that's a reality.
That's real.
Yeah, and they're removing soils now and they're cleaning up the site and stuff like that. So that will be a good 30-year project. I won't be here, but that will be going on.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, this was fantastic, Ed. I appreciate you coming out and doing this, because this was a mix of both educational, like, and resourceful, like people could learn something about the CMPs and stuff like that. And then it's just interesting, right? Which is, oh, hey, I didn't know that many cars come in and out of the city. So this was like a really nice mix of useful and entertaining. And I appreciate you taking the time. It was awesome.
I really, really appreciate being here, Joe.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Ed.
Bye.